Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Backroom Crew podcast. And with me today, we have two guests. Two guests?
Are you looking at me?
Maybe two guests?
Yeah, I'm going to interject.
Okay.
Finish homework at the same time.
Okay. Two guests with me. We have from Black React, Styles and Scruff. Styles.
What's up, everybody?
And their executive producer, Meshale.
What's up?
All right, and for today's topic, we're going to be talking about pretty much how people grew up around their nerddom, like what made them, like were they always a nerd? Were they, did they grow into it, or how did they experience it? Like, what was their first thing to come into it and realize, hey, I'm a nerd? So, I'm going to go ahead. Let's start off with Styles. Styles, so how did you come into your nerddom?
I think it really started from, the 80s cartoons, Like, G.I. Joe and No One Is Half the Battle and Transformers. And then eventually you get to a point where you know all the Transformers and you go to school and you talk to your friends in school, you got the toys and you got the lunch boxes and you got different things that kind of signify, what you like.
I mean, could you really classify that as already being a nerd during the 80s when you're just a kid though?
Well, I mean, I think it starts, you start, it has to start somewhere because you get to a point where you hold on to it.
Yeah, but I mean, my sister even watched that, my younger sister, and we all know she's not a nerd.
It's just. I wouldn't consider myself a nerd at that age.
Well, I mean, what age do you consider yourself a nerd? I think it just, what I'm saying? It's like, I feel like, okay, I watched wrestling when I was 4 years old the first time, and I still like it now. I mean, wrestling used to be one of those things that it was like everybody's dirty secret up until Stone Cold and The Rock came out.
But when did you know that you were a nerd?
I don't really know. I think that's a tough question. I mean, it's like, I don't know. Somebody might have pointed out. I don't know. See, when I was young, though, you was a nerd if you got straight A's. It really wasn't even a pop culture thing. It was you go to school. It's like, oh, look at that nerd. He got perfect attendance. Wait a minute. I'm a nerd because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, the definition has changed over time.
Yeah, the definition is definitely.
The nerd used to be how you dressed and how you performed in school and what you didn't do. If the crowd was drinking and you weren't drinking, well, you're a nerd.
Loser, spaz.
Right. So,
but now they separate it between nerd and geek or whatever.
Right, it is. Because, when you look at it that way, I guess I didn't realize that I was a nerd growing up until I was probably in my 20s somewhere.
Yeah.
But by then, I guess the separation had occurred.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same for me because it's during high school, I didn't really realize it. I mean, I like, nerd things like, Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that, but I didn't really come into it afterwards. I mean, I used to hang out with the jocks and the funny kids or whatnot, so it wasn't really ever one of those things hey, he's a nerd or whatever, because it's they had, it was basic table classifications in high school or whatever. You had people that play the card games, nerds or whatever, then you had the jocks, then you had the pretty girls, the funny kids or whatever like that. So it's yeah, I could get along with anybody. Oh.
Yeah, see, I don't know, it was for me, it was so look at that guy, he's in honors classes and stuff like that. That was my high school. It was I went to honors classes, but I still went to people's parties and stuff. I just, I lived out of district, so I didn't throw any at my house because, who was coming out to Deep Creek when you live in Western, who's coming out to Deep Creek when you go to school in Western Branch. It's well, everybody's over here, so why don't everybody I just go where everybody else is.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, though.
Going out of district?
Yeah, going out of district for a lot of stuff other than parties or whatnot. It's you don't see that many people go out of district for the stuff nerd hangouts unless they actually go into a comic shop or something.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's it used to be that you couldn't really find a lot of stuff for what you wanted. It was like when I was coming up, I remember Trilogy was like right over like on Portsmouth Boulevard. And that was like the only shop that I knew of. Like it was before I even heard of Atlantis. And like if I wanted to go, buy comic books or something, then I'd have to go. Like there was Trilogy, and I think there was some spot over on Mercury Boulevard that I used to go to, or I had my dad take me to when I was like 11 or 12 years old. But it's like it's weird because I think that with the change in what it meant, though, it also like I think the best thing that ever happened to nerds was eBay, because all this stuff that everybody kind of looked down on and frowned upon all of a sudden was worth $1,000-some, and all of a sudden people were just like, wait a second, hold up, I need to get into that. Like you remember those starting lineup figures, the little basketball, football figures?
Oh yeah.
If you had them still in the package, people were just like, wait a minute, they don't make this anymore, or the Transformer lunchbox, the metal ones. Those things became, like, all of a sudden, nerddom became collector's items. Like, everybody was like, people had, like, whatever their sports things were, they wanted to go outside and play. But then some people had video games. Like, if you have a regular Nintendo now, it's like, oh, snap, you got something
And see,
classic.
That's funny to me, that the whole, like, because both y'all are sports fans, right? Mm-hmm. So, why is it that sports is, like, valued so much higher than, like, nerddom stuff or whatever? Like, you got sports memorabilia or whatnot from like the 50s, but if you were to have like collector's cups or collector's figures from like the 80s or whatever, they're kind of looked down on, like collecting them, collecting like a signed autograph football. It's like, why is that? Why y'all think that is?
It's just, I think it's just the grouping, what I'm saying? It's like there's always been a large grouping for sports. Like when it came to baseball, you meet somebody who knew about the Yankees when like Mantle and Babe Ruth and them played. All of a sudden, it's like they'll tell you stories and how everybody that was like they would shut down a city for that. Nobody ever shut down a city for Comic-Con,
Well, and it's also real versus fake.
Yeah, that too.
When you get an autographed football, it is like a memory of a time when it's something that, we may have an autograph, Barry Sanders football. That's something that I can tell Brendan about, oh, he played football and, I got this win. Whereas, a comic book, you can tell a story, but it's not the same. And not a wide variety of people can sit at the table and discuss it. You guys could bring up a comic book about a certain thing and I would look at you like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But if I call out, a random sports player, everybody's going to be able to talk and everybody's going to remember something about that player, no matter how big or small, even if it's just, oh, I knew what team they played for.
Right.
So it covers a wider variety of people versus where comic books and things, it just fits in that one category of nerdom.
Well, with that or whatnot, you say it covers a wide variety of people. You're a female, so it's kind of don't you think it's some type of thing with that, like not disconnect, but okay, you don't notice that many females. I guess they say that females don't like sports, and then they say females don't like nerdy stuff or whatnot like that. I mean, don't you feel like you're different than that? Like, or do you feel like, I'm not sure how I should even word this.
I mean, as a female, it's harder to say. It's easier for females to like sports now because there's so many females that play sports. Mm-hmm. Whereas it comes to nerdom, like, honestly, you don't tend to say. I mean, I was a big gamer growing up, but I couldn't tell my girls or anybody that, oh no, I want to, I sat in the house all day and played Mario or Sonic. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there is a disconnect because you don't tend to go out and tell everybody that you like comics. I mean, just me wanting to go to Comic-Con, one of my friends looked at me like I was crazy. She expected me to drop the boys off at Comic-Con and go shopping. Whereas I was the one who kind of threw out the fact that I wanted to go. So, I mean, even now as adults, it's still hard for us to say that we like things like that. But when it comes to sports, it's not out of the norm to say, as a female, you like a sport. You don't get looked at as, weird as you do if you say you like comic books or things.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it's more basic, and girls watch it with their, boyfriends, with their fathers. They grew up around it. No matter where you're at, you kind of were around it some way, shape, or form, whereas comic books wasn't as open to everybody.
True.
It's also the stories you can tell, you know what I'm saying? If I tell you, I tell you about the time that I met, like, Jerome Bettis, it's like, every time I tell that story, it might be something different. But if I tell you about X-Men number 300, well, that's the same story because that's hardcover print. Like, you can't embellish that either. And I think there's a certain, people, when they get together, you can embellish the heck out of a story, and all of a sudden it becomes, it becomes almost like a one-upsmanship between people, whereas now it's like, well, I know more about this character because, I've read this, and this, and it's like, well, with the character, a character can change based on who's drawing or who's writing for it, It's like the old saying used to go, it's like who would win in a fight, whoever the artist wants to win that day.
Yeah.
Whereas with sports, it's like, until such time as somebody proves that all sports are fixed, then, it's whoever's the better team, whoever's prepared. I mean, they come up with complex algorithms to win stuff like sports betting now.
Yeah.
And also, it's just, up until recently, it was never seen as a lot of money in nerd-based activities.
Well, with that, though, you say it like sports have a lot of algorithms and everything like that. That in itself, wouldn't that make it classified as being a nerd type thing?
Well, it depends on if you want to look at the old version of nerd we was talking about, like from the 80s, or if you want to take the current version of nerd. It's like, you look at somebody, the average person that goes to a comic book shop, he might not be like the math guy. He might just be really into, characters. Mm-hmm. But, you have certain things that, that change. It's like, we all knew that, like, My Little Pony was, like, out back in the day, but now all of a sudden they got, like, little fandoms, of guys that like My Little Pony. That was something that, people, for the most part, if they did, they kept that to themselves, back when we were young.
Yeah. Yeah, that gets awkward to me or whatnot, noticing that a lot of people fandom, like, they become fans over, like, the weirdest stuff nowadays or whatnot. It's like, you'll notice people, they'll be, like, fans of, let's say, Disney princesses. And, they'll say, like, oh, they're a nerd because they're, like, into Disney princesses a lot. And it's just like, during, like, I guess the 90s and the 80s or whatnot, you never really saw that many, I guess you didn't see that many people you didn't see that many people that like Disney princesses or even Disney stuff that much like that, unless it was just like Mickey and Minnie,
Yeah, they came a long way in that.
Okay, we had some technical difficulties, but we're back now. So, we were talking about the, like, the Disney and everything like that. So, with Disney and all these other, like, brands and everything like that, do you think it's a good idea to, like, have them all, like, Disney, for example, they're, like, grouping everything, like Marvel, they're grouping Star Wars. Do you think it's good that they've got it grouped and they're bringing it back and they pretty much know, hey, people like this stuff, like, people like the old stuff, so they're going to bring it back and make it, like, revitalize it or whatever? You think that's a good thing that one company owns all this?
It's never really a good thing when one company owns that much stuff. I mean, the essence of making things good comes from, I guess the limitation that Disney's going to run into is the fact that they only have Disney's people. You know what I'm saying? Whereas if you look at something like Twilight, which was considered by most, like, writing critics to be pretty terrible, has spawned not only its own series / universe, but it spawned 50 Shades of Grey because somebody else was able to start with that basic concept and then spin it off into something else. And I think that's really the essence of creativity. And when one place owns something in its exclusivity, then I think it kind of hinders all those other kinds of avenues. I mean, think about how many Superman stories, how many Mickey Mouse stories, how many different things could be, available if those things were back into the public domain. Mm-hmm. It's like you look at something like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That's something that wouldn't have even existed if it wasn't for the fact that if there was a such thing as exclusivity. I mean, the idea behind it is really great because it's like, an artist can take his own creation and make as much money over the course of his lifetime, possibly even, his next descendant's lifetime, but eventually it goes into like this collective and other people get a chance to kind of see what they can do with it.
I can see that. So basically you're saying fan fiction.
No, I'm saying fan fiction is about the only thing that's left because fan fiction is not something that you can distinctly make money off of. Like fan fiction still has to be free. But think about think about what kind of stories you could write about Batman if you could actually write them and publish them. Mm-hmm. You think about the different things or different situations you may put in and none of the other writers have, or maybe they're kind of stuck within a certain, kind of box in what they're actually able to write about.
You think, with this, do you think that it differs from who writes, like, the character or who does the character? Like, let's say, for instance, with stuff getting rebooted and bringing back and everything like that, it's always different people bringing it back and everything. So, Scooby-Doo, something like that, being written or directed by a African American, like that, or having it someone that grew up with the series, so they're kind of like, okay, I like the old way that it used to be, or let's make it a little bit different. Because you had like a Mystery Incorporated, which seems like they had someone who was very good with storytelling for that, and someone who wanted to connect the story, but also keep that aspect of the old Scooby-Doo with it. What I'm asking is, you think that it differs from people who grew up as fans, or being of a certain race or a certain gender or anything like that, to how good the story will be?
Oh, sorry, how a good story is going to be is really based on the talent of the writeress, him or herself. Because if you, I don't know if you know about this, but there was a French guy way back in the day who, wrote about Harlem. And he had never visited Harlem. He just kind of had this idea of what he felt like Harlem would be like. He took certain writings from Langston Hughes, which were internationally published and things like that, and then tried to give that an extra life, to create a full story. And so people from France were reading this and said, "Oh my goodness, these are people who this must be exactly how it is over there," not knowing that, upon, I guess that guy's death or whatever, it was kind of came out that, he was writing parody. Like, he was writing to kind of expose everybody else's, prejudices and stuff, and nobody else and people who read this thought this was real life, and he was like, "No, you were part of the joke now." And what you ended up having, though, was you had a lot of people whose writings were influenced by that particular guy, because it's like, whenever somebody wanted to write about Harlem, and they couldn't get to Harlem, well, what did they have? They had his writings.
Yeah, but that's different when it comes to a movie, because you look at a movie and the way you grew up with it, and then you see it now. You're looking for certain things that's missing. Take Ninja Turtles, for instance. Through the whole movie, I'm looking for things that I grew up on, like the cowabunga and the, different statements that I grew up hearing from them all the time. And when it wasn't in the movie, to me, the movie wasn't the same. You take your kids and stuff to see movies and things like the Muppets. Everybody turned on the Muppets because that's what they grew up on. And they turned a kids-friendly show that we all grew up on into this raunchy adult, show that was no longer the same. So, I mean, it does have a difference, and you do look at it completely different, because you're going in looking at one thing, and it's coming out to be a completely different thing.
So you think that fans could actually, like, if you grew up with it, you would definitely treat it a lot better than you would not growing up with it?
Yeah, I mean, if you have no preconception, then it's the first time you've seen it, and so you base it off of just what you think. But when you walk into something and you know it's a remake, then you walk into it expecting to see some differences, but not the major things about it you expect to be the same. Versus, like, I get where you're coming from with the writings, but those are writings of someone who's never seen it. So, like, no one ever saw Willy Wonka. The guy who did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory never saw Willy Wonka. That was a horrible remake to me, because I had saw the first one. But if you never saw the first one, you could have possibly thought that the movie was great.
Yeah, but I mean, that really goes down to what you judge quality on. Are you judging quality by adherence to the original source, or by your willingness to experiment with, and tell a coherent story in general?
But then don't call it a remake.
But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't. It's just kind of like, what I'm saying? There's definitely a difference between a remake and a reboot. It's like, when you take, like, a remake is something that's supposed to pay homage to this other thing. A reboot basically kind of takes those same characters and a lot of those personality traits and kind of thrusts them into brand new situations. It's like, you can, a remake sometimes has to kind of retain a little bit of the series feel, or, kind of a, extra bit. Like, let's say, for instance, like Robocop, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, you think about Robocop, right? Now, that was like Paul Verhoeven, the guy whose, like, career pretty much tanked after Showgirls, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, he was trying to tell this story not about this cyborg, but just how bad the city of Detroit really could be. Mm-hmm. And it was about, it was like a strong R-rated movie, and, it was kind of like, but it's something that's celebrated because of the themes of it, not just because of Robocop. Like, Robocop, of course, is a main part of the story, but, and he did a lot to help make it iconic, but there's so many other themes in there. Like, there was the fact that there was drugs, there was city corruption, there was all these things that were underlying themes that when they tried to reboot it, all of those things were missing.
Right.
And I think it's kind of hard to, it's hard to ever look at it as the same. It's like, you look at Total Recall, like, that was another movie by him that, had certain themes about, like, a lot of it, like, they had racism and, definitely, like, human race versus aliens and stuff like that. It had shortages and, corporations, evil corporations, etc., taking over everything. Versus this new one where it was like, it was really completely based on whether or not this guy was dreaming or not. And it takes you, like, out of it significantly, comparatively.
So it's like, so you're thinking, like, the people that make all these remakes coming out now, or reboots coming out now, they don't have anything to do, or probably never even seen the old ones.
I think they've seen it. I think it's just, if somebody's putting in money, then they're not putting in money to take a chance, Like, when you look at Star Trek, right? Mm-hmm. One of the big things that used to divide Star Trek and Star Wars fans was the fact that, Star Wars was like, is a fantasy. It's like the space opera. It's like the, this legitimate sci-fi. Whereas, or it was like legitimate science fantasy. Mm-hmm. Whereas, Star Trek was like your science fiction. It's like a lot of the things that, they had, the full-out video screens, the communicators, which we now look at as cell phones, and a lot of stuff like that. We are things that, realistically, I think they are literally things that we saw, eventually happening. And now you look at Star Trek now, and it's like, it's just as well like some combination of what Star Wars was and what Guardians of the Galaxy is.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what they're going for with Star Trek universe.
But basically that just means that in actuality what you've done is dumbed it down. You know what I'm saying? You dumb that fiction part out. It's like people hated Star Wars for having those trade negotiations and all the diplomacy and everything. But original Star Trek, that's exactly what it was. So you can kind of see this whole division. It's like, well, oh no, people hated this diplomacy and negotiations and all this other stuff in Star Wars, so we make sure we don't put it at all in Star Trek because obviously that's a franchise killer. And on top of that, Star Trek killed at the box office. I mean, Star Wars killed at the box office. Star Trek really never did.
Yeah. So, I asked this question also. Do you think that it's okay to dumb down, like if you're a fan, like as a fan or whatever, do you think it's okay to have stuff dumbed down to you or whatnot, or do you think that it should be at least a little bit? Because I guess when I think about stuff and I grew up and whatnot, it's like I didn't really think about the political or stuff really catching my eye or whatnot, when you're a kid or whatnot. But when you're older, you kind of want more of a story and everything. So, what do you think, Shell? You think you want stuff more dumbed down? I mean, as a kid, did you want more stuff dumbed down, or did you want it like, at least tell a good story?
No, I preferred the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you dummy stuff down, sometimes it takes away from everything else, because dumbing down takes too much time away from the actual story, and by the time you get to the story, it's not enough left to really give you a story when you're too busy trying to explain everything and
Right.
To me, that stuff you figure out along the way through the story.
Right.
So, yeah, I would prefer to give me the story, don't dummy it down.
Okay. Mr. Styles?
Well, it's kind of tough. I mean, it's like back in the day when we were younger, it's like we didn't have a Netflix, or we didn't have, or like only certain people had HBO and different things, so it's like, back then, you could go to, you might see a movie a month or so. The average person probably saw like at least one movie a month, and now you see people that the average is people see 5 movies a year. And lately, it's kind of been like people are seeing the same 5 movies. It's like if you ask a random group of people, you're gonna have a good sized group that saw Fast and Furious 7 last year. You had a good group that saw Jurassic World last year. You had a good group that probably saw Age of Ultron last year. All these movies that and definitely a group that saw Star Wars. So it's like you definitely have these billion-dollar movies, which doesn't leave much for anybody else. So it's like, it's not so much that the movies are being, say that movies as a whole are being dumbed down, but when it comes to, people are going to pour the most, going to pour the most into the least. It's like, by trying to please everybody, it's kind of what they kind of do. And I think that is a really tough, it's tough for fans to watch, because it's like, yes, we do really want the smart stories, but the smart stories are on Netflix now. It's like you want something that really has a lot of creativity. It's like you got to go away from network TV. You got to go to Hulu. You got to go to these original series that aren't necessarily held by the same constraints, because now you got this whole new class of people that are saying, you know what, I'll fund that. Or you got people going in there and saying, go ahead, I'll fund this movie. And that movie might be really, really good, but that movie was made on a $5 million budget. And people were looking at like, I need this to be at least 60. It needs to be at least 70 before, I mean, it's weird to think that the amount of money spent on something influences us that much, because if that was the case, if it was just based on story, I mean, you got to look at the fact that people don't even go to plays like talking about anymore. Like the average person sees 5 movies a year, might see a half a play.
That's true. I mean, that's true.
And you think it's production value because of that? I mean, hey, it's like, name one bankable star. Name one person whose name makes you want to see a movie. It doesn't really exist anymore.
Some people say it'd be Robert Downey Jr.
No, people want to see Robert Downey Jr. They want to see Tony Stark. They don't want to see Robert Downey Jr. Soloist. What we talked about the other day? Soloist. The Juror.
Soloist,
What
Juror,
was the other day? Due Date. How did Due Date flop? And Due Date was great.
Yeah.
But people go to watch Robert Downey Jr. play Tony Stark in every movie now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because we were talking about Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp or whatnot. Because, yeah, they don't want to see Johnny Depp act in a movie. They want to see Captain Jack Sparrow.
Right.
You know?
I personally still want to see Johnny Depp.
Oh.
All right. If you can sit through Mordecai, I will take you up on that. I will believe that. But I think everybody, I think what it is now is that everybody has their stinkers now. Mm-hmm. It's like Will Smith. You know, he was untouchable. I mean, he's the guy who got away with Wild Wild West. And he put out Focus. And I mean, between Focus and After Earth. And it's just been like, dang, Will. What happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, I also wanted to know, talk about Will Smith, you know, Jada Pinkett Smith's doing that whole, like, protest and everything because, you know, black actors were snubbed at the Oscars this year and everything like that. But, you know, also people talk a lot that, like, comic book movies and, you know, the whole, like, big budget kind of fandom movies and everything like that, they were also kind of snubbed and whatnot. So, I guess my question is, do you think it's fair that, like, well, of course, black actors getting snubbed, do you think that literally there weren't any good movies in the last 2 years that had black actors in it?
I think we just put way too much credit into this whole idea of awards. I mean, to look at an awards, to give an award any credibility, you have to look at who are the people that's picking the awards. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? It's like the average age is 63. There's 74% men, 94% white. It's like it's not necessarily, you know, racism as much as it is relatability. Mm-hmm. It's like if you are a 60-year-old white guy who is a part of the academy, it's like, one, there's no telling for sure that you've even seen all the movies that are up for consideration. You know, at best you might have seen like the submission reel they send in, or whatever. But it's like if you're 60 years old and you've lived in New York your whole life, what does Beasts of No Nation mean to you? If you don't even like football, what does Concussion mean to you? It's like if you grew up on Rocky, but now Rocky's not the one in the ring, what does Creed mean to you?
Yeah.
It's like, would people honestly know what Creed was if you hadn't seen Sylvester Stallone's face? Mm-hmm. It's a tough call. I mean, especially when it came out the same year as Southpaw. It's like, wait, 2 boxing movies came out, and what's going on with that? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very difficult, and I also think that there's a certain familiarity of names that people have. You know, you look at the best animated movies, and the only one that I can honestly say I really recognize was Inside Out.
Yeah.
You look at people say, what was that? That song by Wiz Khalifa didn't get even a nomination for Best Original Song. But it's like, you can say that, but then again, there are certain rules. It's like, well, did he release it on his album? Did he release it on his album at the same time? You know, it's like are there certain rules that they needed to be considered for certain consideration? I mean, it's like, yeah, there was always that case that between the previous year when it was like Let It Go versus Happy.
Yeah.
Now, which song has more staying power?
Happy.
Exactly, but which song won?
Let It Go.
Because it was a bigger song at the time. And I think that, when you take something, like that, it's really hard to really flex a lot of creativity because, I mean, there's no middle class of movie anymore. There's like these ultra low budget art house type movies, the kind that we would go see at the Narrow. Mm-hmm. And then there's the AMC movies and the Paragon movies that we'll go see and sit in IMAX and 3D and, you know, debate the merits of whether or not it was worth paying $15 to see this movie. It's like, you're not looking at a movie like, I don't even know what was really nominated this year, but like, say, Ex Machina or something like that. It might have been, you know, you're not looking at Ex Machina at a midnight show. It's like, you kind of got to get away from this idea of the adult, like the R-rated movie. You know, it's tough to get away with that. It's like everybody's talking about Deadpool having R-rated, you know, it's R rating, but it's like up until this, it's like R-rated superhero movies or R-rated comic book based movies, you know, haven't done that great.
Yeah.
I mean, we love Dredd. Apparently, not everybody else loved Dredd.
I have to rewatch Dredd.
Really? You're just gonna shoot me down like that? Huh?
I mean, for what it was worth, but you know, I watched Dredd during the point, like right after watching the Raid, so it was kind of like I've seen this before. I you know, so I can't really give it a good rating or whatever. But I have to admit, a lot of people told me just watch it again, give it another shot or whatnot, come in like unbiased and everything, and you'll actually like it. So, you know, I was thinking about I'm gonna do that definitely.
Well, it's like Snowpiercer, you know what I'm saying? Like, went and bought that on a whim just because it was there, and it actually turned out to be like insanely good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like weird because like that was like what, the fourth comic book movie that Chris Evans did.
Yeah.
It's like he was Human Torch, Captain America, the guy in the Losers, and then Snowpiercer. I mean, the fact that even there's a lot of movies people don't even realize are comic book movies, or at least like, you know, come from some sort of fiction and not original ideas. Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I thought John Wick was an original idea.
Yeah.
But apparently that's, you know, he has his own little backstory and everything.
Well, I think it's still original idea. I just think they must have made something afterwards, after the movie came out.
Then they made something afterwards?
Yeah.
Oh. I thought that actually was an adapted work or something. Like he came from something.
They made something afterwards or whatever.
Mm.
You know, it's like so if you could make something yourself or whatnot as a fan, like make something yourself, would you want to do more of a go out there and just have it as like a you know, right out in the open? Like, would you want to go out and just say, hey, let's make a movie and go all out, you know, nerd stuff in it or whatnot like that? Or would you want to make it like subtle nerd, like people, like it would be able to be watched by, you know, people that are big fans, or, you know, people that aren't?
Well, you want to make something that's good. I mean, it's really hard to look at, you know, it's really hard.
I guess I'm saying, would you want to make something original and make it like a fandom after it, or would you want to go into making something, you know, not original, like improving on somebody's work, like improving on Daredevil, or improving on you know, I guess making a Max Payne movie or something?
In other words, would you want to do the work, or would you want to take the lazy way out?
Well, I probably want to do the work then, you know.
So basically make a new character.
Yeah, I mean,
all new.
But at the same time, you can't always assume that, like, it's like Stan Lee may have created a lot of these Marvel, gets credit for a lot of the Marvel characters that him and Steve Ditko created, but you can't necessarily say that Stan Lee made them all good. Like, Stan Lee took his type, and then somebody else went and picked up the reins, and, you know, I mean, you look at the original, them old original Batman, it's like what happened, the Joker got killed in this first episode, right? Mm-hmm. And you look at him now, and it's like, whoa, who would have thought? Or, you know, it's like now the Joker is just as important to, like, the whole Batman mythology as Bruce is.
Yeah.
And I think that people kind of feel a certain kinship with it. I mean, it's like, you look at Spiderman. Spider-Man's whole thing was, yeah, he has these powers, but at the same time, he's going through, I mean, he has the worst luck in the world. And everybody's, you know what I'm saying? It's like, if you wanted to talk about somebody that could have survived the Killing Joke, it was Spider-Man. You know what I'm saying? Because the Joker always talks about having that one bad day. Gordon to have that one really bad day. Always wanting Bruce to have that one day that caused him to snap. It's like Spider-Man would have made a lot of people's heads spin by now. All the bad stuff that happens to him.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was still the fact that, like, sometimes one of the things that makes Spider-Man amazing is not necessarily his abilities, but the fact that he's actually is the humanity of it all. Is the fact that he's able to. The moral of the story is that no matter what happens, you can still come back up.
I can see that. Shale? Anything add to that?
I don't think so on that one. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of told him out. Not in a bad way. My apologies.
Well, all right. So, we'll go ahead. Closing thoughts as far as your upbringing and everything like that. Talking to like younger generations, you know, they're kind of between coming out as nerds and everything like that, because you guys are pretty much know your stuff and everything. So I guess, what would you say to, you know, I guess your daughter and son, who, if they wanted to, you know, pick up that first comic book and everything like that, or, you know, go out to their conventions dressed up as a superhero, or, you know, become that like professional esports gamer or something, like, what would you say to them?
I think it really comes down to a lot of it is really just reading. You know what I'm saying? Being observed. You know what I'm saying? Not just reading and different things, like, you know what I'm saying? Harry Potter got a lot of kids that probably wouldn't have read a book, you know, to really enjoy reading. And it's like, from there they take it and go anything. It's like, my son wants to pick up a comic book and he enjoys reading it, then that's good. Then he can find other things he wants to read. It's like, as far as being in esports, it's like, become very observant, you know? I mean, there's an attention to detail, I think, that probably suits, you know, a lot of non necessarily gaming related type of fields or things. I think there's skills that people pick up, and I think it's just a matter of understanding that you can learn from just about anything.
True.
You just gotta do it because you want to. Don't do it because the group is doing it. Don't not do it because the group is doing it. If that's what you want to do it and enjoy it. Don't follow the crowd.
Okay.
I mean, I look at it more in like my son, you know, and it's a lot that he likes. So I mean, just enjoy it. And don't try to hide it or not do it, you know, because that's not what's in. So a lot of people, you know, enjoy stuff, but they don't take part in it because of what others may think.
That is true. That is true. And I know, for one, being in that crowd or whatnot, sometimes you don't necessarily know that you're a geek or a nerd or whatnot, but then once you find out, you're like, oh wow, I'm a geek. And what's, I think, unique about it also is being African American, growing up in certain areas and everything. You're kind of, I think you're persecuted a lot more for being a nerd than you are if you're, you know, just like a regular, you know, white kid or Asian kid or something like that. You know?
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's like, Shell, I know, me for one, I grew up in a kind of hood area. Shell, you also grew up in a hood area, so it's like, yeah, if you like you said before, you told your girls, like, you know, you like playing games or whatnot like that, you get clowned.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, at a certain time or whatnot, I know around my street, we could play with Pokemon cards or something like that. But if we took that stuff to school, it's like we get joked on so hard for that.
Yeah, you had to keep it a secret.
It is a bit of an isolation type of thing, though.
Yeah.
But I think that's what changed. I think that's really what changed, though. It's the fact that it's not in shadows anymore. You don't have to, you ain't got to hide somewhere in the library to talk about Spiderman. You don't have to, it's just so open now. It's almost like, wait, now you look at people and it's just like, wait, you don't know who Superman is? Like, what is wrong with you? You don't know about this? What's wrong with you? You're not going to see this?
Yeah, it's more widely accepted.
Yeah.
And I think that's just because of movies coming out.
Yeah.
Which are opening people's eyes to the fact of what it really is.
That is not something like, because I know, like, for one, my grandmother thought that going to anime conventions, I was going to some type of cult demonic festival or something. So,
as they used to say, man, so many things that people come up with for things they don't understand.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But it's easier to simplify something that you don't understand as bad rather than actually just admitting that you don't understand it. It's like you become, it becomes a situation where you demonize things. But I think that is, that's part of what leads to certain things that when people have to try to make a defense for something that, when it comes time to mount a defense for something that, people try to actually mount a defense on something that is bad. It's just like, well, wait a minute now. What about this over here? It's like they try to equate it because it's like, well, what about you like that movie that has this in it? Now you don't like me because I do this kind of thing. And it's just like, now you got to worry about that reality versus fiction line. But it's kind of like with everything else. It's like it comes in. It's like right now it's riding a pretty high crest and wave. And eventually it'll go down and it'll be something else.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just a matter of, what people feel like is going to make the money. I mean, if you would have told me that in and here it is 2015, that we still know who Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and all this other stuff is, people back then might have said, oh man, you're crazy. But we all about these Archies, honey, honey, sugar, sugar, and all that stuff, but it's just like when people look at music, if you like listen to any kind of, there's not enough time to play all the stuff that we used to listen to in the 90s. Oh, but when you start cherry picking all the stuff that has lasting power, it's just like, oh wow, you know what I'm saying? But you forget about like a lot of the bad stuff that we, it didn't sound good. It's like we dog music now, but it's like a lot of stuff that's out right now, it's not gonna have staying power to be around 20 years from now, to be the stuff that we actually consider classics.
It's like half the stuff that like Soulja Boy did, it was big at that time, but half the people now don't even remember who Soulja Boy is.
Right. Well, that's because also too is just so many people, like there's so many carbon copies. There's so many people that's just that similar. Mm-hmm. Nobody really tries to stand out, and I think that's whereas it was like this attempt to like start seeing that one hit wonder as such a bad thing that it's like we're not gonna put a whole bunch of investing in all this into being a one hit wonder anymore. We want this person. Even if this song has to sound exactly the same as the next song, we'll still put it out. Whereas, heck, one hit wonders would have loved iTunes. You know what I'm saying? Like the guy who rickrolled. I mean, it's like he's probably more famous now than he was then.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's like sometimes, as they used to say, these times come and they go, and if you're lucky, you'll see them come back again. So,
all right, this is pretty good. This is good. I like this. So, we're gonna go ahead and end it off. Y'all wanna plug your station?
Oh yeah.
Channels?
Definitely come check us out. Styles and Scruff on YouTube and Black React with Styles and Scruff on Facebook. Check us out. Like, share, and subscribe. Give us your comments. All our contact information is up there. Let us know what you think, and keep listening to the Backroom Crew.
Yep, and we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna put that down below and everything like that. So this has been the Backroom Crew podcast. Remember, like, share, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. And we'll see you guys next time. Say it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And show some class and act like you've been somewhere before.
Peace.